In today's biased news, French police are still racist. Germany takes part in war games. And Texas Republicans did something good. Following the recent protests after the killing of an unarmed teenager by French police, another demonstration took place in central Paris in defiance of a new protest ban. Reputable sources claim the protests were peaceful, as meaningless and ideologically loaded as that term is. Regardless, French police dispersed the crowd, arresting 2 and issuing further bans on demonstrations in the cities of Lille and Marseille. So far, over 3,000 mostly teenage protesters have been arrested, but the French police union maintains that they are the real victims, having repeatedly demanded to be able to escalate the level of violence against unarmed children. Meanwhile, the French government has denied institutional racism exists, with the French Foreign Ministry stating, quote, "Any accusation of systemic racism or discrimination by law enforcement in France is unfounded." This came one day after the United Nations demanded that France deal with their, quote, "structural and systemic causes of racial discrimination, including in law enforcement." French police violence, the highest in Europe, has only increased after certain legal changes, including one allowing police to fire on vehicles at traffic stops based on incredibly subjective criteria. This is the 15th such killing since 2022, with the overwhelming majority of victims being Arab or African in origin. Every single time, the French police have lied about the victim, as well as protected the murderous officer that carried out the crime. French media has given the police every benefit of the doubt, even after eyewitness and video evidence proving that they lied about what had transpired. The killer cop getting some much-deserved criticism has rallied the far right, sparking massive attempts to protect the murderer, for whom the reactionaries have raised over $2 million. This joins other systemic issues exacerbated by the current liberal government in France, from police brutality against peaceful protesters to religious intolerance. As always, the French liberal democratic capitalist state stands at the forefront of being on the wrong side of history, refusing to grapple with their past, including horrific colonial crimes and austerity policies. Germany, for the first time, will send troops, around 300 of them, to Australia as part of joint drills with about 30,000 service members from 12 other nations, underlining Berlin's increased focus on the Indo-Pacific amid rising tensions with China in the region. When asked what message this first deployment of German troops was meant to send to China, the army chief stressed that Berlin did not aim to antagonize anybody, despite, of course, the blatant military posturing. The lieutenant general said, quote, "We aim to demonstrate that we are reliable and capable partners that contribute to stabilizing the rules-based order in the region," an admission that they're acting as a German shepherd on a US leash. President Vladimir Putin has held talks with Wagner founder Prigozhin and his commanders to discuss the attempted mutiny Wagner mounted against the army's top brass, according to a Kremlin spokesperson. The meeting was held on June 29th, 5 days after the aborted mutiny. According to Moscow's official spokesperson, Putin had listened to the commanders' own explanations of what had happened and had offered them further options for employment and military service. The spokesman said, quote, "The commanders outlined their version of what happened on June 24th. They emphasized that they are staunch supporters and soldiers of the head of state and the supreme commander-in-chief. They also said that they are ready to continue fighting for the motherland," end quote. As the Russia-Ukraine war rages on, causing countless deaths on both sides, neither belligerent is making much progress. 3 boats carrying at least 300 migrants have disappeared off Spain's Canary Islands, according to a statement by migrant aid group Walking Borders on Sunday. It's been reported that the boats carrying African migrants, which took off from Senegal to reach Spain, have been missing for 15 days. It shouldn't surprise anyone that these increasingly frequent tragedies have received almost zero mention in the news, a stark contrast to the wall-to-wall coverage of the missing billionaires on the ramshackle submarine. US President Joe Biden has met the British Prime Minister and King Charles III while on his way to a NATO summit. In a comment on Sunday, Biden said that Ukraine was not ready for NATO membership. It should be apparent at this point that NATO has no intention of actually helping the people of Ukraine, but rather are simply using them to further their geopolitical interests. And in positive news, in a rare friendly move to low-income renters, lawmakers have shot down a North Texas homeowners association which had banned renting units to Section 8 tenants, who coincidentally just happened to be black. The HOA policy threatened to displace more than 170 families from the majority-white enclave. This went too far for even Texas Republicans, who joined with their fellow lawmakers to prevent this discriminatory practice. Homeowners associations are the absolute worst, so it's nice to see them get slapped on the wrist. That's all for today. We'll be back day after tomorrow with more news. As always, you can support the show and get the news in text form a few hours early by becoming a patron at patreon.com/firstthought.